the biggest need for each team. We'll go team by team, starting the AFC East with the Buffalo Bills. Biggest team need for the Bills this offseason.
Offensive line. People are going to, I think, focus heavily on the need for that number 2 wide receiver, the extra threat opposite Stephon Diggs or alongside Stephon Diggs. But I think the offensive line is a bigger problem. And the further the year dragged on, I think the bigger an issue it was becoming, and was very much sort of skating under the radar because of the way Josh Allen plays, because of the way this offense was still putting up big numbers, was still making explosive plays. But that offensive line started off the year playing below average and got worse as things went on. And at its worst this season, I think was genuinely problematic.
Heading into the offseason, Roger Saffold, starting left guard, is also a free agent. We've seen the tackle play get a little bit worse with Spencer Brown as the starter there. Their backups, they're also hitting free agency for the most part. It is going to be an interesting discussion because Gabriel Davis didn't step up as the true number 2 that maybe we expected coming off the Jerry Rice playoff game. And that's the big discussion, right? We heard Brandon Beane, who I think there was misleading audio there or misleading titling of some tweets. But Brandon Beane, he was asked about the Bengals and how they built the receiving core and how they got Jamar Chase on the cheap because they got to pick in the top 10 and all this stuff. But that does seem to be the focus, right? It's the receivers. And I think that is something they need to focus on. You know our stance on that. But have they crept back to average enough? They were a little bit below average this year. They have to get that back on track this offseason.
Yeah, I mean, I think sort of as a roster construction methodology, Buffalo's offensive line has deliberately not put a ton of resources into it. I think they've taken the approach of, we don't need a great offensive line. We just need one that's capable, that's able to be average, even below average at times, but just hold up its end of the bargain, and everything else will function because we have Josh Allen and we have Stephon Diggs, and we're able to make it work. And I think the risk with that is that if you get a down year from multiple players whose baseline is kind of average to below average, all of a sudden that can become quite an issue. And I think maybe they just strayed a little bit too far over that line and need to at least up that baseline just a little bit and get it more comfortably into the, solid range.
All right, let's move on to the Miami Dolphins, where we've got a similar answer here, Sam. You went with offensive line for the Dolphins as well, despite last year bringing in Connor Williams, bringing in Teron Armstead. Some of the moves that they made last year did make the line better.
Yeah.
But especially when Teron Armstead's hurt, man, it was tough to, really see that in full effect.
They were a lot better. But even so, I mean, you add Teron Armstead, let's assume he's 100% of a fix, even though chances are he'll only play 75% of any given season. Connor Williams was definitely an upgrade. Robert Hunt, who was already there, the incumbent, I think is already a good caliber starting lineman. That's only 3/5 of the line that's fixed. Like the other 2 spots, I think, are still problematic. And we've talked before about how you can get by with one weak link in an offensive line. You can patch that up. You can game plan around it on a weekly basis. I don't know that you can really do it with 2. And if you have to go to 3 because Teron Armstead misses 4 or 5 games, I mean, now you're back to having just an offensive line that's undermining everything that's going on with the entire offense. So I think even with the additions that they've made, they still need to keep hammering on that. Like, you're not done just because you got 3/5 of a reasonable offensive line. You need to get 5 or 4 at least.
Right tackle Austin Jackson still hasn't really played well at any point in his career. Brandon Shell struggled when he had to fill in last year, especially when he had to move to left tackle, a place he hadn't played in years. And Greg Little, Shell and Little are both free agents. So it does seem like the Dolphins should be looking at tackles regardless, right? Just getting tackles in the building, both as Teron Armstead insurance, but also as a potential starter at right tackle. And then left guard is the other problematic spot where we've seen Liam Eichenberg struggle. We saw Robert Jones in and out of the lineup last year, just okay. So,
and also specifically for Miami, I don't know if this is going to be a factor when they're thinking about this kind of construction, but with what Tua dealt with last year, the multiple concussions, being out for at least 5 weeks in the protocol by the end of the last one, you probably need to treat Tua with kid gloves in a way other teams don't necessarily treat their quarterback. So Miami's approach to building an offense, if they are invested in Tua, if they believe in Tua going forward, probably needs to think of, we need to protect this guy, like more than other teams do. We need to treat Tua in a different way than Buffalo, for example, that we just talked about, treats Josh Allen. We have to protect Tua because the guy dealt with, multiple concussions and was out long term.
Yeah, so we use the phrase creep back toward average. Are there certain quarterbacks, though? I remember talking to this, our friend Zach Robinson, Rams QB coach. Maybe certain quarterbacks do need a tick better than that from an offensive line perspective. Derek Carr could be that type of guy that just you don't want to mess with it, right? You'd rather be in that top 5 to 8. At this point into his career, despite the quick release, he does protect the offensive line. Despite all of that, do you want to actually pursue, the way the Chiefs did, a top 5 offensive line rather than just a decent one?
I mean, I just think the difference with him is I don't want to use the term durability necessarily, but him staying upright is a concern. He's a small quarterback. He is a apparently relatively fragile quarterback. Just the chances of him getting hurt, I think, or concussed are just bigger than they are with Josh Allen. I think that's the reality we're dealing with here. So if you are invested in Tua and you say, look, the EPA was matching Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs when Tua was healthy, and that's what we want going forward, and he can cook within this offense. If that's what your belief is as a team, I think you have to say we need a better offensive line than most teams do, because aside from anything else, his history, the concussion history, is just scarier than most quarterbacks.
The Dolphins also will need running backs at some point. All those guys are hitting free agency, so running back is also on the list, Sam, but not the biggest need. We're going with the offensive line.
Yeah.
PFF NFL podcast is brought to you by Western and Southern Financial Group. We're not in Western and Southern studio right now, but they're still bringing you the podcast.
Don't you miss it, though?
I do miss it.
The plaque on the wall?
I do miss it quite a bit.
The mugs. We don't even have a Western and Southern mug. It's a bottle.
We should have brought it with us.
I know.
For the show. While you focus on your roster moves, Western and Southern helps advance your money moves. Buying your first home, planning to start a family, wondering how to make your money grow? Well, Western and Southern's playbook of life insurance, investment, and retirement solutions helps you rest assured on game day. Team up to understand needs and address goals with a game plan built just for you. Get started at westernsouthern.com/PFF. All right, working our way through the AFC East, we're on to the New England Patriots, where you're saying the top need is wide receiver.
Yeah. Jacoby Myers has been their best receiver for the last few years. Even Jacoby Myers at that level, you're like, okay, he's nice, he's a good player, gets open, does a lot of good. Is he, a true number one? Is he a real difference maker for this offense? And Jacoby Myers is a free agent. So
it shows how weak the wide receiver class is. He's our top wide receiver free agent. Nothing against Jacoby Myers, but in past years, the Allen Robinsons and Kenny Galladay's of the world were free agents. And
Kenny Galladay's, yeah.
Maybe they didn't work out as well, but those were the types of names, Chris Godwin, the guys that were hitting free agency at least before they got franchise tagged or locked up.
Yeah, and they're going to expect Tyquan Thornton to step up and be a bigger player for them this year or upcoming year than he was as a rookie. But still, they need, this offseason for them, I think, has to be about putting Mac Jones in a better situation. Obviously, they started that with hiring Bill O'Brien back to run the offense. We expect that will help from a coaching standpoint. The offensive line, I think, is already in a good spot. But now you need to give Mac Jones some players to throw to. And obviously, they've done that in the past. They went on the free agent spending spree. But, give the man some wideout help.
So our friend Phil Perry, who NBC Sports Boston, covers the Patriots, was just talking to him yesterday over here on Radio Row. Media Row, sorry. Yeah, just correct me.
I will. I got you.
It was like relearning the Washington football team's name. You know what I mean?
Every year.
Yeah. On Media Row, we were talking about that, and that's his biggest discussion point. Maybe we'll have him on the show at some point. His biggest discussion point is wide receiver 1 for the Patriots, and it sounds like fans are playing fantasy football. Get Mac Jones some weapons, get him some wide receiver 1, and there's, but it's kind of the truth, right? I mean, it's what the Chargers have done with Justin Herbert. Was invested to put pieces around him, made sure that they had Mike Williams and Keenan Allen locked up, made sure that they had the offensive line. It's what the Super Bowl participating Eagles did with Jalen Hurts on his rookie contract, bringing in A.J. Brown, transforming this offense. And A.J. Brown also transformed the Titans offense with Ryan Tannehill, right? So,
and the Eagles, by the way, were a team that kept swinging, right? They made the gaffe. They drafted Jalen Reagor instead of Justin Jefferson. That didn't stop them drafting Devontae Smith the next year at the top of the draft. And then having Devontae Smith didn't stop them from going and aggressively trading for A.J. Brown. You need a collection of impact wide receivers unless you have Patrick Mahomes. And the Patriots don't.
In the Patriots, you could talk yourself into coming into this past year when they added Devontae Parker late on the cheap, had Nelson Aguilar, Jacoby Myers, who we mentioned, the two tight ends, Hunter Henry, Jonnu Smith, plus draft pick Tyquan Thornton, plus Kendrick Bourne. Like, you could kind of talk yourself into the depth of that group potentially working out, but it didn't. Whether it was schematic, whether, Nelson Aguilar has had, what is his career now at this point? Like 2 good years now out of 7?
Yeah.
Where they came randomly and they came in different styles, so you couldn't rely on him. Parker was in and out of the lineup. Thornton was in and out. Bourne was in and out, not even playing. That didn't work. But if you did have an alpha 1, and I don't know where you find that around the league, T. Higgins trade, whoever it might be.
Yeah.
But if you have that, it does make everyone else's job better, and I do think that needs to be a priority for the Patriots. I'm all for it. I'm with you.
Yeah, I mean, this is a strange offseason for addressing some of these needs. I mean, we're gonna be talking as if it's easy to just go find a player that fixes your biggest problem.
Yeah.
But it is a bad free agent group. Either you're going to be positioned in the draft or you're going to have to trade for somebody.
And then, it doesn't seem like you've got the true wide receiver 1 maybe in the draft. So is it double up on receiver type of year and just kind of see what sticks?
Yeah.
Let's round out the AFC East. New York Jets. It's pretty clear. It's the quarterback position.
It is. Yeah, I mean, fairly self-explanatory.
Zach Wilson didn't work out.
No, Zach Wilson didn't work out. I don't think you can trust Mike White as the starter based off what we've seen from him. They were a team that should have made the playoffs this year and didn't because their quarterback situation was bad. So go fix that. And quarterback is actually one of the few spots where I think you can address it in whether it's free agency, whether it's trade. I think there are options for a quarterback-needy team. And the Jets, I think they might be the best landing spot for most of these quarterbacks, whether it's a team or whether it's a quarterback like, Tom Brady before he retired, or Aaron Rodgers now, a sort of aging veteran looking for one last ring, one last shot at a ring. The Jets make a ton of sense. Whether it's a team like, or a quarterback like Derek Carr, who, needs a situation that's already good for him to look as good as he wants to look, right? Like the Jets make a ton of sense for a guy like Derek Carr. So I think there are quarterbacks out there for the Jets, but they need one of them.
How good is the Jets situation? Because I
think it's really good.
There are some people that still question how good is it actually. I think it is a good defense. They've certainly improved there, and they've got some playmakers to throw to as well.
Yeah, my only question, and I think the offensive line will be a lot better than it was last year. Like, it was supposed to be a top 10 caliber unit before the season. It wasn't because everybody got hurt. That's probably not happening again. You're also going to have an offseason to keep adding reinforcements, whether it's free agency, the draft. The big question mark really is play caller. Like, they move on from LaFleur. They bring in Nathaniel Hackett. Now, are they doing what the Broncos were supposed to do last year, which is let's bring in Nathaniel Hackett to woo Aaron Rodgers?
Rodgers bait.
Right.
Yeah.
And if that works, great.
Depends on what the stars say.
Yeah. Or are they just bringing in Nathaniel Hackett because they think like he's an upgrade at that position? And if they are, I think that's TBD. Like, I think that's sort of up in the air. Obviously, his resume is good up until this Denver disaster. But when I think there were sort of red flags based off what you heard about him before that Denver gig, that maybe this might not be applicable to everybody other than Aaron Rodgers.
It's so fascinating looking at the chat here, too. There was an early suggestion, hey, Rodgers or Ryan Tannehill were the 2 suggestions.
And that happened, like, that was a conversation yesterday because Mike Sando had an article quoting sources saying that Rodgers should go to Tennessee.
Yeah.
And, that was a conversation. Like, is it worth, who's better, Tannehill and what he's being paid right now, or Aaron Rodgers plus his contract plus the trade? That's a fair question.
But that's what's so fascinating about all of this stuff, right? Where, for whatever reason, the Jets, not for whatever reason, but say the Jets feel good about their situation, and their quarterback situation was so bad that they're yearning for Derek Carr or Ryan Tannehill, and that's going to be good enough for them. Whereas there's other teams, the Titans, who made an AFC championship a couple of years ago, might be yearning to get away from Ryan Tannehill, right? And the Raiders said, we have to move on from Derek Carr. Right? I mean, it is that dichotomy around the league right now where there's a market for Derek Carrs and Ryan Tannehills, and then there's teams trying to get rid of them and get to Aaron Rodgers, right?
Yep.
And trying to get to the massive upgrade. So Jimmy Garoppolo, also that name's been dropped in here, right? I mean, similar West Coast offense. The Robert Saleh was the coach in San Francisco for a couple of years, defensive coordinator when Jimmy Garoppolo was there. I mean, I think either way, if the Jets even get one of those non-Rodgers guys, they should be at least competitive.
Yeah.
But then they run into that same, we have a Carr, a Garoppolo, a Tannehill, we have a mid-tier quarterback. How far can they really take
That's
us?
the only problem. Like, you look at the Jets, like, really good roster, really good situation. I think even an average guy like Derek Carr, Jimmy Garoppolo can come in and improve that team and make them competitive and take them to the playoffs. But are they enough to overcome even just the division? Are they enough to overcome the Bills, Miami, based off what they did? The Patriots won't be terrible ever and presumably look to upgrade their offense. Like, that's where you start to question, is Derek Carr, Jimmy Garoppolo enough for that?